Cavia County, Florida, deputies are investigating a murder attempted suicide. Investigators say a man shot a woman, then turned the gun on himself.
According to the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, it happened at East Shore Drive and West Michigan Avenue around 1:40. Right now, the investigation is ongoing and no other details have been released. We'll update you as that information becomes available.
A woman posts 3 words on Facebook. 3 hours later, she's dead. So is the father of her child. 2 lives lost, 1 baby left behind. What happened in that quiet Florida apartment? What turned a status update into a crime scene? And what unfolded between those 3 words and the final, irreversible moment that ended it all has left an entire community in stunned silence. Social media is our digital diary. Ever scrolled back through your posts and thought, wow, was that really me? Social media doesn't just capture memories, it captures moments. The joy, the heartbreak, the rage, unfiltered and time-stamped. But here's the twist. It's not just a diary, it's a mirror. And sometimes what we see reflected isn't just us, but who we were trying to be. One that reflects our rawest emotions for the world to see. For Kavia Simmons, a 20-year-old mother fighting to reclaim her life, a status update wasn't just a post. It was a breaking point, a bold choice. And for Tradarius Gray, the man she once called love, it was a spark. At 1:40 p.m., she hit post. To her, maybe it was a sigh of relief, a breath of fresh air. To him, a red line, a trigger. It was war, public, personal, provocative. A digital dagger to the pride of a man who thought he still had control. A digital slap in front of everyone who followed their story. Tradarius wasn't just reading her words. He was unraveling because of them. To him, that post wasn't a breakup. It was betrayal broadcast. Psychologists call it a narcissistic injury. When a fragile ego takes a hit so public, it feels like an ambush. And for partners like Tradarius, unstable, controlling, it doesn't just sting. It scorches, not like losing love, more like losing control. And for men like that, control is everything. Kavia had no idea, but with one tap, she lit the fuse, and the countdown had already begun. 3 hours later, everything would detonate. But what was hiding behind those 3 words? And how did an ordinary afternoon unravel into something irreversible? The truth cuts deeper than a status update. Deeper than one man's pride, and far deeper than just a broken relationship. Because this wasn't just a breakup, it was a power struggle, a fight for control, and a final, chilling choice that would change everything. The signs were there, they always are. We just don't see them until it's too late. Before the headlines, before the vigils, the sorrow, and the shattered hearts, she was lively, bright, the kind of girl whose laughter made strangers smile, whose presence could shift the energy of a whole room. The girl with the sunshine laugh, the smile that lit up every corner of Pensacola. Not a case file, not a statistic, just a 20-year-old mother trying to rewrite her story, chasing peace, chasing joy, chasing the freedom she knew she deserved. This is Pensacola, Florida, a city of blue angels, sugar-white beaches, and deep military roots. But to those who knew her, Pensacola wasn't just a place. It was Cavia Simmons' stage. And on that stage, she wasn't just seen. She shined, the brightest star in a sky no one expected to go dark. She was just 20, a recent graduate of Escambia High School, still figuring things out but always moving forward. She worked part-time at Hollister in the mall. And if you ever shopped there, you probably heard her before you saw her. Kavia was the one behind the register, cracking jokes, making customers laugh, and coworkers roll their eyes in that here she goes again kind of way. But that was her magic. To her friends, Kavia wasn't just fun, she was magnetic. The girl you called at midnight when life felt too heavy. The one who could turn a random Tuesday into a night you'd never forget. She didn't need a stage to perform, just a group chat and a Bluetooth speaker. If there was music, she was dancing. If there was silence, she filled it with a one-liner, a story, or a laugh that made everyone else start laughing too, even if they didn't know why. In a world that often feels too serious, too dark, too quiet, Kavia was the light. You couldn't be sad around Kavia, one friend said. She just had that energy, like she was always dancing through life. And in so many ways, she was. Her presence could lift a room, even on its worst day. Every laugh, every selfie, every spontaneous dance move, it all felt effortless. But behind the jokes and the filtered photos was a deeper strength. Because Kavia wasn't just the life of the party. She was a mother. A brand new mom, just 20 years old, still learning how to balance diapers with dreams. Her baby girl was only 4 months old, tiny, wide-eyed, always in Kavia's arms. And every picture, no matter the pose, no matter the chaos, Kavia was holding her close. You could see it in her smile, the kind of smile that only comes when you're looking at your entire world. Becoming a mother didn't slow Kavia down. If anything, it lit a fire in her. She got her own apartment, bought her first car, started setting real goals, bigger dreams than she'd ever voiced out loud. She wasn't just surviving, she was building a life with structure, with purpose, with love, not just for herself, but for her daughter. Every decision, every step forward was for them. To the outside world, she looked unstoppable, a young mom making it work, chasing independence, smiling every step of the way. But like so many young women, Kavia lived 2 lives. There was the one everyone saw, bright, bubbly, strong. And then there was the other, the one behind the front door, the one with quiet arguments, red flags, and apologies that came too late. A life she didn't post about, a life she tried to manage in silence. She was moving on, reclaiming her peace, reclaiming herself. But when control turns into possession, even the smallest act of independence feels like rebellion. And to someone who equates love with ownership, freedom doesn't look like healing. It looks like defiance, a challenge, one they refuse to lose. She was doing everything right, starting over, living for her daughter, smiling through the struggle, holding her head high for the world to see. But someone was watching. And to him, Kavia's smile wasn't a symbol of joy. It was a threat, proof that she was moving on, that she no longer needed him, that he'd lost control. And for a man like that, there's nothing more dangerous than a woman who refuses to be afraid. They looked like the couple you'd root for. The matching outfits, the baby bump photos, the smiles that screamed forever. Every post painted the same picture. Young love, glowing, growing, unstoppable. But that was the version crafted for the timeline. Behind the lens, another story was unfolding. A quieter one, a darker one. One where control replaced love and fear lived just outside the frame. It was never picture perfect. It only looked that way. Cavia Simmons and Tradarius Gray were what some people called inseparable. They met the way many young couples do, through friends, through DMs, through the blur of social media. And when they clicked, it was fast, non-stop talking, constant texting, a whirlwind of affection that felt like a movie. To the outside world, it looked like love. But to those paying closer attention, it looked like control in disguise. Psychologists call it love bombing. An early red flag in emotionally abusive relationships. Fast, intense, overwhelming. Not because it's real, but because it builds dependency. Tradarius promised Kavia the world, told her she was everything. And she believed him. Why wouldn't she? She was young, in love, hopeful, and soon, she was pregnant. Cavia Simmons and Tradarius Gray were what some people called inseparable. They met the way many young couples do, through friends, through DMs, through the blur of social media. And when they clicked, it was fast, non-stop talking, constant texting, a whirlwind of affection that felt like a movie. Tradarius promised Kavia the world, told her she was everything, and she believed him. Why wouldn't she? She was young, in love, hopeful, and soon she was pregnant. The pregnancy played out like a fairy tale, at least online. Their baby shower was big, joyful, packed with friends, family, and flashing cameras. Photos flooded Kavia's feed, beaming smiles, pastel decorations, captions like "blessed beyond measure." But behind the balloon arches and Instagram filters, something was shifting. Abuse rarely starts with a slap. It starts with silence, with isolation, with control carefully disguised as concern. It starts when the victim stops being seen and starts being managed. By the time her baby was 4 months old, Kavia had seen enough. She made a decision. A bold one, a dangerous one. She moved into her own place, bought a car, started living life on her terms, not his. For the first time in a long time, she was choosing herself. And to a man like Tradarius Gray, that wasn't freedom. That was betrayal. It should have been her victory, her second chance, her new beginning. But for Tradarius, it marked the unraveling. To him, Kavia wasn't stepping into freedom, she was escaping. And in his world, you don't escape. Friends say he started showing up unannounced, waiting outside, arguing in parking lots like the world was his stage. He texted nonstop, threatened, then apologized, promised change, then repeated it all again. It was a cycle, one Kavia knew too well. He was sorry, until he wasn't. Still, even after moving out, she kept up the illusion. Photos with her baby girl, smiling selfies, captions about new beginnings and fresh starts. Victims often mask their pain in positivity, says one domestic violence advocate. They want people to see hope because they need to believe in it themselves. And Kavia clung to that hope, with every post, every smile, trying to write a brighter story for herself. But Tradarius, he didn't see hope. He saw defiance, smiles that to him weren't signs of healing. They were insults, proof that she was fine without him, happy without him, free without him. And then came that final Facebook post. To the world, it was closure. To him, it was betrayal. A public rejection he couldn't ignore and wouldn't forgive. Kavia thought the nightmare was behind her, that she had finally broken free. New place, new path, new peace. But what she didn't know was that the final act hadn't ended. It hadn't even started. Because for men like Tradarius, closure isn't accepted. It's forced. And the most dangerous moment is always the one right before you think you're safe. Social media is our scrapbook, a place for memories, milestones, and sometimes hidden warnings. Before Cavia Simmons was murdered, she left behind a trail of digital breadcrumbs. The question is, did anyone realize where they were leading until it was too late? The days leading up to her tragedy told a story, not through smiling photos, but through haunting phrases. Words scattered across her feed like quiet alarms, easy to scroll past, impossible to ignore in hindsight. To strangers, her words may have read like jokes. To friends, just late-night venting. But to trained eyes, they weren't random posts. They were warnings, red flags, big, bright, impossible to miss if you knew what you were looking for. In digital behavior, cryptic or emotionally charged posts can be a signal, experts warn. They often point to suppressed fear, emotional exhaustion, or hidden distress. Victims who don't feel safe speaking their truth code their pain in sarcasm, slang, or vague updates. And Kavia had become a master of it, masking discomfort with humor, disguising cracks with captions. But behind the jokes, something was unraveling. Slowly, quietly, until it couldn't be hidden anymore. For an abusive partner, a breakup isn't just the end of a relationship. It's a direct strike to the ego. And when that breakup is made public, broadcast for everyone to see, it doesn't feel like heartbreak. It feels like humiliation, a wound to their pride, a challenge to their control. And that's when they become the most dangerous. Social media becomes a stage, a place where love is performed and rage waits in the wings. For Kavia, every post was part of a countdown. Her timeline wasn't just updates. It was a clock, ticking toward an ending she couldn't see. And those words she shared, they weren't just thoughts. They were signals, emotional SOS messages, hidden in plain sight. But there's a cruel irony to modern life. We scroll past red flags every day. We double tap the jokes. We ignore the pain between the lines. We don't want to intrude. We tell ourselves, it's just venting, until the posts stop, until the laughter fades, until it's too late. Psychologists call it coded communication, a trauma response born when speaking plainly feels dangerous. Victims hide the truth in innuendo, in slang, in jokes only they understand. It's a way of testing who's listening, who's paying attention. Javia's posts were exactly that, a test. And the cruel reality is, we all failed. Her final status wasn't just a breakup post. It was defiance, a line drawn in the sand, a declaration of freedom. But for the man who refused to let her go, it was the final straw. The wound to his pride became unbearable. The crack in their relationship collapsed into chaos. And from that moment on, the clock was ticking. Time was running out.
An investigation underway after 2 people were shot in Escambia County last night. Deputies called to the home on Hernandez Street around 8 o'clock. They found a man and woman dead. The sheriff's office believes this to be a murder-suicide. The names of the victims have not been released.
At approximately 4:25 p.m., Escambia County deputies arrived at apartment 158 inside the Stardeck Place complex. They were responding to multiple 911 calls, neighbors reporting a string of gunshots, 5 in rapid succession, and then one final crack. What deputies found inside was unimaginable. The small unit was unnervingly still. The only sound, the cries of a 4-month-old baby girl, alone, wailing, her tiny body covered in blood that wasn't her own. Just feet away, her mother, Jakavia Simmons, lay lifeless on the floor, shot multiple times. Nearby, her ex-boyfriend and the baby's father, Tradarius Gray, was slumped to the ground, the gun still close to his body. The scene wasn't chaotic, it was frozen, silent except for the baby's cries. Investigators would later call it a horrible crime scene. No signs of forced entry, no visible struggle, no second chances. Just 2 young parents, gone, and a child left in the silence. The responding officers, men and women hardened by decades on the force, were shaken. One later admitted off-camera, "It's one of the worst things I've seen in 25 years. It wasn't just the blood, it was the baby sitting between them." They moved quickly, scooping the infant from the floor, wrapping her in a blanket, and carrying her out into the fading daylight. Outside, word spread like wildfire. Neighbors poured out of their homes, phones buzzing with the news. By sundown, more than 100 people had gathered at the complex, some sobbing, others silent, all in disbelief. Just the day before, many had seen Javia laughing, holding her baby, smiling like any young mother with her whole life ahead of her. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder outside her apartment, praying, grieving, asking the question no one could answer. How did it come to this? There are some scenes that never leave you, not because of the violence, but because of the silence, because of who's left behind. That night, no one in the complex slept. Some neighbors left candles flickering on their steps. Others stayed inside, too stunned to speak. A member of Kavia's family was called to take the baby. She would be safe, physically, but the truth would follow her for the rest of her life. She will grow up asking questions, and one day, someone you'll have to answer. You'll have to tell her that her mother wanted freedom, and her father couldn't let go. The scene inside apartment 158 wasn't just tragic, it was final. 2 lives ended, 1 life forever altered, and for a moment, the world outside that door stood still. Kavia Simmons didn't fall victim to a sudden outburst. She was trapped in a storm that built slowly, signaled its presence, and then finally erupted. And it's important to understand, this wasn't love gone wrong. It was control. Gradual, calculated, suffocating control. On the surface, Kavia looked like the picture of independence, a young mother raising her baby, smiling in selfies, showing strength. But behind the lens, the signs were glaring. These weren't random changes. They were warning signs, markers of a coercive relationship tightening its grip until there was no escape. Coercive control is the invisible leash. It doesn't leave bruises, it leaves confusion, fear, second-guessing. It strips away freedom while convincing the victim it's still love. He tracked her posts, her movements, even her moods. Possessive outbursts, threats disguised as jokes, anger dressed as jealousy. Ultimatums, the chilling promise, if I can't have you. That wasn't affection. That wasn't love. That was ownership, and ownership always ends in destruction. One of the deadliest mindsets in intimate partner violence is emotional entitlement, the belief that someone belongs to you, owes you, and cannot leave you without consequences. That's exactly what happened here. Tradarius Gray didn't just grieve a breakup, he raged at it. To him, Kavia's choice wasn't about freedom, it was about humiliation, an insult to his pride, a strike against his masculinity. And in a culture where toxic masculinity confuses dominance with self-worth, a woman walking away doesn't just feel like rejection, it feels like rebellion. And in his twisted logic, rebellion demanded retaliation. 75% of women murdered by partners are killed after they attempt to leave. And in more than half of those cases, the perpetrator had already made threats. Kavia's Facebook posts, they weren't random, they weren't casual venting. They were coded cries for help, quiet alarms dropped into a digital void. And while the world scrolled past, Tradarius was watching, not with concern, but with rage, boiling, waiting, one. The most chilling part? This isn't rare. This isn't random. It's a pattern. And unless we learn to recognize it, to take it seriously, to believe it when we see it, it will happen again. She was just 4 months old, too young to speak, too young to understand, but she saw everything. When deputies stepped into apartment 158, it wasn't gunfire they heard. It wasn't shouting. It was a cry. A desperate, helpless wail. The kind only a baby makes when she doesn't understand what's wrong, only that something is. She was in the middle of the room, blood on the floor. 2 bodies beside her, her mother, her father. She was alone, alive. And in that moment, changed forever. Today she's in the care of family, safe, fed, loved. Her body bears no scars, but her story does. The emotional wounds, they're still forming. Invisible now, but lifelong. Experts warn that children who survive murder-suicides don't just carry trauma. They carry questions no one can ever fully answer. Kavia's death wasn't just tragic. It was preventable. And if we stop here, if we mourn but fail to learn, if we turn the page without facing the lesson, then she becomes just another name, another headline, another candle flickering in the night. Just one day after her murder, more than 100 people gathered outside Stardeck Place apartments. Some were neighbors, some were friends, and many had never even met Jakavia, but they came anyway. Candles flickered in the night. Photos were passed from hand to hand. Tears fell quietly. And in between sobs came silence. The kind of silence heavy enough to speak for itself. On social media, Kavia's final post became more than a status update. It became a timestamp, a chilling marker of the moment before everything collapsed. About how often the red flags are ignored. About how social media has become both a diary and a danger zone. We need systemic change, not just mourning after death, but action before it. We, friends, neighbors, families, must stop treating toxic behavior as relationship drama. We must listen when someone says they're scared. We must act when they begin to isolate. We must stop assuming he'd never do that. Every red flag we ignore is another warning we throw away. Every ignored post might be someone's final cry for help. Cavia Simmons was 20, a mother, a friend, a woman building her life. She should be alive today, laughing, posting silly selfies, watching her baby take her first steps. Instead, her story ends in silence, but it cannot end without meaning. Kavia Simmons' story is not just about loss, it's about lessons. It's about the signs we ignored. It's about what happens when control masquerades as love. and when cries for help go unheard. Her story teaches us this. Abuse doesn't start with violence. It starts with isolation, control, and silence. Breakups aren't death sentences, but for too many women, they become exactly that. Every red flag ignored is another warning discarded. Every post dismissed as just venting might be a coded cry for help. If you're in a relationship that feels unsafe, controlling, or suffocating, you don't owe silence. You don't owe survival on someone else's terms. You deserve freedom. You deserve safety. There is help, and there is hope. Subscribe to Crime Gone Viral, where we tell the stories that matter, expose the truths that hide in silence, and fight for the justice that still hasn't come. Comment, like, and share, because the next scroll could be someone else's warning, and your share might be their lifeline. Her voice was silenced, but the fight to prevent the next one starts with us, starts with you. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, stay alive. Thank you, and God bless you.